Hello everybody, this is Conquering History Games, and it's an exciting day. It's the start of a new Crusader Kings 2 campaign here on the channel. The subject of this campaign has been chosen via a poll that I put out in my community tab. Remember to check that if you're a subscriber. And the choice that I gave you, the subscribers, was: did you want me, for my next Crusader Kings 2 campaign, to play as a Muslim in Egypt with a twist, or as a Muslim in India with a twist? And the Muslim in Egypt won by a pretty big margin of error. At various times during the poll, over 2/3 of you wanted the Egyptian campaign to happen. So we are going to be playing in the Egypt area, but we're not going to be playing in a typical bookmarked date. The bookmarked dates are fine and all. I certainly see why people enjoy them, but you know, there's a lot of fun to be had when you step off of the beaten path. So check this out. Here's what we are going to do. We're going to go to December 31st, so I can demonstrate exactly what it is we're going to be seeing here. Alright, and it is now the year... Whoops, misclicked. Oh, goodness gracious. Boy, good start to the campaign, huh? Alright, so we're going to go to the year at first, 1249, December 31st. And we can see here, Egypt is run by the Ayyubid. If we were to jump forward one year, we are going to see they are ruled by the Aybakid Sultanate. However, there was a dynasty that ruled Egypt in between these two other sultanates. We do not remember it usually because it only lasted for a few months. So if we go forward, it actually is called Egypt. What do you know? And we have here Queen Shahar al-Dur of Egypt. That is right. An Islamic female monarch of a rarity during this time period. She was not the first ever Islamic queen, so to speak, but she was the second, so it definitely was something that was pretty unprecedented at this time. And then beyond that, she is also Armenian, so she is not a Bedouin, she is not a Berber, she is nothing. She is nothing in these Arabic culture groups. She is a part of the Byzantine culture group. And let's go ahead and jump into the actual campaign. And I'll start explaining it. I've just turned off the Sunset Invasion. I actually do usually like to leave the Sunset Invasion on for kicks, but there are some things in Western Europe that I want to see how they're going to play out, and I don't want the Aztec invasion to interrupt that, basically. So let's go ahead and start the game. Now, what I first want to do is we're going to talk about the character that I am playing as here at the start, at least, in question. And then I want to kind of take us through the map, since we're not starting in a typical bookmark. We're in the year 1250 here. There's some really interesting things going on. So first, of course, we have to talk about who we are. We are Queen Shahar al-Dur of Egypt. My apologies for any and all pronunciation errors. We are, let's first actually look at what our character is considered here, according to the game. Dutiful cleric, cynical, just, ambitious, and lustful. Alright, and we have some people who we are the suzerain over. Nice. Okay, so for a little bit of context, in the previous dynasty, the queen's previous husband, actually, although the family and relations thing seems to be blank for her, that's okay. Sometimes there's little historical inaccuracies in here, but I think it's fantastic that Paradox even put her in the game at all. It really shows the kind of attention to detail they have, or maybe not attention to detail, but at least getting a lot of rulers correct. Technically, she came to power in May, but it's no big deal. So, let's talk about the context of us. As you can see, the Kingdom of Jerusalem is still existing here. This is during the Crusading era. The Crusades have not ended, although a lot of people seem to think that the Crusades just ended with the Fourth Crusade in 1204. No, although we're going to talk about the consequences of that as well. But as you can see here, Jerusalem has been lost. Actually, my spy master is the Duke of the area at the moment, so that's kind of cool. So Jerusalem has been lost. Now, when this happened, historically, the Pope actually did not care, Pope Innocentus IV, because he was in some conflicts with the Holy Roman Empire at the time, and he was too busy to care. Like, you know, the shine of conquering the Holy Land and taking back Jerusalem that had existed a couple of centuries earlier was very much gone by this point. So what ends up happening, though, is we have Louis the Ninth of France over here, who launches a crusade. So as you can see here, he actually has the Crusader trait. It has already come and gone. He launches a crusade against Egypt directly, and during the fighting, Shahar al-Durr's husband, who was the head of the previous dynasty, is killed. Now, when that happened, he did not have an heir. Him and Shahar had a child. Incidentally, Shahar al-Durr means tree of pearls. She was supposed to have been quite beautiful, as well as intelligent and pious. They had only had one child together, and he had died young. So, since they didn't have any children, and because Egypt was in the middle of a war, the country, or I should say the leaders of the military, conspired with Shahar to not reveal to the public that her husband was dead. That husband, incidentally, being Asali Ayub. And they went to great lengths to just pretend that he was ill. For example, they would actually have food sent. He'd have dinner sent to his rooms every night because he was eating. And that's what they claimed anyway. I don't know what they did with the food. Maybe they ate it themselves, or maybe they just threw it away. I have no idea. But this went on until the war ended, when the crusade ended. This was the 7th crusade, by the way. This happens in 1249, obviously. And it ends when King Louis's brother, who actually should be here... Yes, here we go. Prince Alphonse, I believe. Yeah, Prince Alphonse of Poitou was defeated, and the French went back home with their tails between their legs. So afterwards, there was then a power struggle within Egypt over who was going to become the new dynasty, with two factions, one being led by the Queen Shahar here, and the other one being led by a man whose name is actually escaping me right now. I think his name was Taransash. Now, Taransash was eventually defeated by Shahar and the Mamluks. And this is a little bit contentious. He was either killed by concubines, or he's killed by the Mamluks, or he was killed by concubines that were paid for by the Mamluks. So the Mamluks install her as queen. Now, historically, what would end up happening is eventually her new husband, as you see here, King Ibak, who's actually currently the Duke of Alexandria, of this area here west of the Nile. He will eventually have her killed, and he seizes control of the Sultanate for himself. So she was only queen for a few months. So what we're gonna, of course, try to do is have that not happen. Also, I'm not super digging this logo here. Let's customize the house while I am talking, or actually even before. I'm trying to find the. I kind of want it to match the Kingdom of Egypt's color. I really like it. There we go. Let's go to 12. Which emblem? No, we want... Where's the... No. Ooh, kind of like that, but no. Here we go. I like this. The crossed swords and a V. V for vaginas, because we're a woman. I think that'll be pretty cool. Maybe go... What do we want here? Maybe a green. No, I think we'll go with the black. Where was it? I just saw it. I just saw the black. There it is. Okay. Yeah, that'll do just fine. So we are House Mamikonian. And again, we are Armenian. So why are we Armenian? That is because Queen Shahar al-Durr was a slave. So she might have been Armenian. She may have been Turkish. I cannot seem to find, personally, a definitive source saying what she was, but I do like the concept of her being Armenian, because when we look down here at the cultures, obviously we're mostly Egyptian, but we got Berbers encroaching from the west, and the Nubians, the East Africans, are encroaching in from the south, so they've actually taken this little area here. But there's certainly nothing Greek anywhere close to us, except for maybe Crete. So, and the Armenians, of course, over here in Armenia. They got actually two sort of sections here as far as culture groups go. So I think it'd be cool to try to turn Egypt Armenian. That's of course going to take a long time, and we're already starting relatively late in the game. We've only got 202 years to play with here, but that should ultimately be plenty. So now that I've talked enough for almost 10 minutes here about our character, let's kind of take a glance out into the wider world. There's a whole lot of stuff going on here. I think we'll start over here on the Iberian Peninsula now. I have promised before, and I continue to promise, that once Holy Fury comes out, we're going to be seeing at least one campaign of mine out here in Spain. I have studied medieval Spain. I am continuing to study medieval Spain. It's just a fascinating era, and there's a lot of detail I can go into here. And here's a little preview of those details. Right now, we have Castile, which has taken up quite a lot of the peninsula, and it's being run by King Fernando II of Castile, although he could also be seen as King Fernando III of Leon. Because if we go down here to his titles, he is the king of both Castile and Leon. He has united them. Now, the reason for this is because his father was King Alfonso VIII of Leon, and Fernando, his son, had inherited Castile, and when Alfonso died, he had originally wanted to leave Leon to two of his daughters. There's here, I think it was Sancha, and where's the other one? Dulce? I want to say it was Dulce. Yeah, she's already dead here. She died a couple years earlier. So he was going to leave it to Fernando's half-sisters. And this was really controversial, and what ended up happening is Fernando bought it. He basically buys Leon from them, and they get to live lives of luxury until they die, and he gets to be king of the United Realms. At the same time this is happening, now King Fernando was very, very beloved king of Castile, actually canonized by the Catholic Church. Very pious man. I think it should actually show if we're down here. No, diligent, temperate. Okay, maybe not. But he was able to take the Reconquista to an extent that it had not ever really gone in at that time. You see southern Spain, kind of, central south Spain, down to Gibraltar and whatnot, was being ruled by the Almohad Sultanate. But they began to suffer from some internal conflict, internal civil wars, and at one point, one of the pretenders to the Almohad Sultanate actually just decides to pack up and leave Spain entirely and return to North Africa, which is their traditional homeland. These are kind of more fundamentalist Islamists. These are not the ones who were like the Umayyads much earlier, who were creating this progressive intellectual conglomeration of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim life, of course, with Muslims on top. These were much more fundamentalist Muslims down here, much more extreme. So there's a power vacuum, and Castile, but also others, as you can see, Portugal and Aragon, they took advantage of this, and they began to push down south. There was a number of notable victories during this point. Cordoba, the old capital of the Umayyad Caliphate in Spain, was taken, but probably even more importantly, Fernando was able to get his hands on Seville. He also was able to get a couple of Muslim vassals, which they have shown here. So, for example, here is this guy, the Sheikh of Cadiz. He is Andalusian and a Sunni Muslim. Is this guy not a vassal? There's somewhere in here. If I look at his vassals, I'm sure he's got Muslims. He should. He had some historically. Maybe they just didn't want to bother with that. All right, well, it's not a big deal. So that's what was going on in Spain. Over here, and again, I'm going over these different things to kind of contextualize this world, so you all are invested in it. And I think, I'd like to think this is what makes me stand out. Me talking about the history of these games that these games are based on. So, before we come over to France, actually no, let's talk about France now. So you'll notice that Navarra has quite a lot of territory here in France. So does Aragon, for that matter. But France is looking a little weird right now, and that is because this king, King Tybalt, the troubadour of Navarra, is actually French. There was a lot of intermarriage going on in these time periods between Navarra and France. Of course, France will later have Henri of Navarra become their king. That's much later, though. Much later. Like, that's outside the scope of Crusader Kings 2. But there's a lot of intermarriage, occasional personal unions happening between these two countries. So you see right now you have this Frenchman who is the king of Navarra. Just wanted to check something real quick. Okay, got it. So he has his personal holdings over here that have reverted to him. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out. I'm really curious to see how the Reconquista is going to play out as well. Yeah, up here in England, we've got Henry III as king, who is notable for being completely unnotable, pretty much. He's kind of a boring dude. He's not really got any legends around him. He's not a very exciting guy. His father and his son were much more famous than him, because his father was, of course, King John of England. He's the one who was the famous from the Robin Hood stories, the brother of Richard the Lionhearted, and he's also the guy who signs the Magna Carta. So Henry III is his son, and of course he will spend much of his reign attempting to retake lost Plantagenet lands such as Normandy and Anjou. It's not going to go very well. In fact, it's going to be a disaster. But probably the most important thing King Henry III ever did was plant the seed of Prince Edward of England. Edward Plantagenet is, of course, very famous in the modern day because he's the bad guy in Braveheart, implying the English did anything wrong. But seriously, so he's going to grow up to be Edward the First. He's going to be a crusader. He's going to him and his son Edward II and his grandson Edward III. That's going to be the Edwardian century around the 1300s. That's when all that is going to be going on. But Henry III himself, kind of a boring dude, not much going on. In fact, look at this, he's weak. It's a bad trait to have. Now let's continue to move west here and talk about the papacy and Kaiser Frederick II. So during this time, let's see if he's actually already been... Okay, he's not been excommunicated yet. You're right, I don't think that happens until later. So the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy have a centuries-long history of being in conflict with one another, but it was kind of entering a hot zone during this time. You'll notice that the Holy Roman Empire is freaking enormous right now. It's all the way down to Sicily. It has southern Italy almost entirely. There's a couple break-off states here, such as Lombardy, and this is what's actually causing some controversy between them and the Pope. So Pope Innocentius IV, with this newly independent Lombardy, he wanted it incorporated into the papacy, which of course Kaiser Frederick did not want to do. He was not going to allow that. Lombardy was part of the Holy Roman Empire as far as he was concerned. So this is basically the reason why when Jerusalem was lost, the Pope certainly did not care. What the Pope did care about is what to do with the Holy Roman Emperor. So at this time, he calls a council. One of the attendees of the council was the actual Emperor of the Latin Empire. That's right, Baldwin II, or Baldwin II. He is in charge. That's right, the Latin Empire is still here. It's been 46 years since the Fourth Crusade happened and it was established, and it's still around. It's still ruled by Frenchmen, but they've stuck around for a good long time. In fact, Emperor Baldwin II here was the only Latin emperor who actually is born in Constantinople. They were starting to kind of plant roots. It never really went too well. They were never able to get some of these other independent Greek states, or even the Latin ones, like Athens here. As you can see, Athens is run by a Frenchman. Achaia is also run by a Frenchman. He was never even able to get them to swear fealty to him, much less the rest of the Byzantine Empire, which is, of course, very small at this moment. It's getting squeezed in by Serbia and Bulgaria, and Rome is, of course, always a threat to the east. Anyway, so the Latin Emperor and like 3 bishops or something came to a council that Pope Innocent IV held, and that's where they excommunicated Kaiser Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire, he told all of his subjects that they did not have to swear loyalty to him anymore because he was being excommunicated, and so that created problems, and eventually the Pope sort of wins out. They were able to compromise, but the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire certainly looked weak afterwards. Another thing, just one more note on Pope Innocent IV here. He wasn't actually so innocent. He is the one who legalized in the Catholic Church the ability to torture heretics. He said that was okay. So in some ways, he's responsible for all the later tortures of the Spanish Inquisition, because he was the one who said it was perfectly fine. Okay, moving on, a couple other things to look at here. It's 1250, the Teutonic Order has arisen. They've been pushed out of Hungary now, but they're hanging out in the Baltics, and so they're pressuring Poland and Lithuania, particularly Lithuania. But here's a very famous Lithuanian figure, Duke Mindaugas, the only king of Lithuania there has ever been, although he is not king right now. Of course, like if we just look at the de jure, he's still got quite a bit of it to grab. So maybe we can see that happen. It could be interesting. So, here's a very important Lithuanian figure that we have up here, so that's kind of cool. And let's talk about these huge 4 letters that are going through, that are starting here in the Caspian and going out into practically Siberia. This is the Yuan. These are the Mongols. If we go up and up and up, currently led not by Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan has passed away by this point. We have, here Temujin. He died. Wait, died a natural death? What? Okay, no. Okay, sorry. I thought it said something else. Anyway, so he's been dead for about 23 years. And so at this point, where is he? Goodness. There we go. His, wait. I'm trying to find him again. Yeah, his grandson, Batu, through his son, Jochi, is currently running the Golden Horde, basically, which has a couple of huge areas that they are in charge of. And they're still moving west, and then they've definitely moved far west. I believe they've already taken Moscow by this point. They're in Bessarabia. They've taken basically all of modern-day Romania. They're pushing up against Poland and Hungary, and they would historically sometimes succeed against those two countries before they eventually, basically the rubber band happens and they just start to retreat back into Central Asia. But down here is another important Mongol, Helugu, the Khan of the Ilkhanate, which for right now, at this point in 1250, is subordinate to the Yuan. Although they will eventually break away and become... Well, break away is a bit of a strong word. They're just sort of left to their own devices, is a better way to put it. Interesting. I just noticed this guy, he's got sympathy for Christendom, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Eastern religion. Very interesting. And of course, he's a skilled tactician, 18 martial. So he's running wild here in Central Asia, and he's got his eyes on taking it all the way to the coast of the Mediterranean. Historically, they're going to come deep into Anatolia here. They're going to be pushing a lot of the Turks west. They want to get at least to the borders of Egypt if possible, and it is going to be Egypt and the Mamluks who eventually will stop, the Mongol advance down here towards Africa. But one thing that the Mamluks were not able to do was save the Abbasids. So we have the Abbasid dynasty under their final caliph, Al-Mustasim. So he's a Bedouin. They are Arabic, and they specifically trace their ancestry all the way back to the time of Muhammad. The Abbasids are, of course, the ones who overthrew the Umayyad dynasty and then moved the capital of the Arabic Empire to Baghdad. And that was about 500 or so years ago, before where we are here. And so, they'd risen, they'd fallen, but they had been around for quite some time. And Al-Mustasim is calling himself caliph still. He is saying he is the leader of the entire Islamic world, although in reality, those days were long over, as you can see by how small they were. So what happens historically is that Helegu, the Mongol, is going to come down here and attack them, and he's going to take Baghdad. He is going to loot it, sack it, kill all of Al-Mustasim's children in front of him, except for maybe one who might have been packed off to Mongolia or something like that. Sources vary. And then there's 2 accounts as to how the caliph was killed. The one you hear most of the time, and this is definitely the overwhelming majority what the sources say happened, is that the Mongols were going to kill him, but they didn't want to spill royal blood. So they rolled Al-Mustasim inside of a big rug, and then they trampled on him with horses and killed him that way, and that way they didn't spill any blood. But there is a claim by Marco Polo, of all people, Marco Polo, the Italian explorer, who's going to go east to Mongolia, and he's going to meet Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan is not in charge out in China yet. That's not going to be for another, I think, 11 years. He is... Marco Polo claims that the caliph was being held prisoner, and then Hulu here, went into the Baghdad treasure room and noticed just the obscene amount of wealth that was inside the tower. He then takes the caliph and he basically says, "You're stupid, why didn't you spend this on your military?" Throws him in the tower with all the treasure but no food or water, and says, "Eat the treasure since you care so much about it," and the caliph would starve to death inside the tower. Both pretty bad ways to go. Okay, so So yeah, that covered quite a lot of this world that we are looking at here. Of course, I didn't even mention the Delhi Sultanate here, which was actually the first Islamic monarchy that was ruled by a woman. But you have these Muslims over here, although you can see they're having a little bit of trouble actually converting the populace. They've taken control of huge swathes of India here in the north, pretty much from Bengali to the Ganges. And so they've got the Hindus and the Jains and everybody else kind of hemmed in, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well. All right, was there anything else I wanted to talk about? Of course, the Latin Empire is still there. It's going to historically fall in, I think, 10 years, so let's see what the Byzantines are able to do there. Yeah, I think we covered a ton of bases. So in the next episode, I know, I didn't unpause, but I swear I'm going to in the next episode. In the next episode, we're going to have to overcome a few obstacles. Of course, I am a woman, so a lot of people aren't going to be happy about that. I am regularly married to a husband, so any children we have are not going to be mine, and I don't have any children. So at this moment, I have no dynastic heir. I am also Armenian, so there are going to be cultural problems that I have to deal with. And also, there's very little doubt in my mind that a crusade for Jerusalem will not be called. I doubt that. Ugh, I'm getting my tongue all flubbed up. I am positive a crusade is going to get called for Jerusalem because we have just taken it. And so we're going to have to deal with all of Christendom coming down here and attacking us because Jerusalem is within my territory. But if we can survive that storm, if we can have a child, if we do like a dozen other things all going correctly, then I think it could be a pretty good run. Also, incidentally, we have King Hughes the Great here of Jerusalem. Just an interesting little thing about him. He was also king of Cyprus historically. Note that he is also French. Pretty good time to be French. In the king of Navarre, king of France, king of the Latin Empire, king of these Greek areas, duke of these Greek areas, king of Jerusalem. They're all French. But one of the interesting things about King Hugh the Great of Jerusalem, I don't know how he's great at 17 or at 15, but he, St. Thomas Aquinas, the Italian priest, allegedly wrote a book for him called, goodness gracious, how is it pronounced? The De Regno. Basically, it was something for the king, and it's kind of the equivalent of Prince that Machiavelli is eventually going to write a couple centuries later. So yeah, de regno means on kingship, roughly translated. And it just talks about like what's the good thing about being a monarch, good things about being a tyrant, and honor and glory are just cheap to a king, and he should always look to God for his rewards, not for earthly glory and things like that. But it's kind of interesting. St. Thomas Aquinas, obviously a very important scholar in many fields. Whether you're Christian or not, is definitely one of the great minds of civilization, or at least influences. Anyway, so thank you very much for joining me. I'm Conquering History Games. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click the bell so you're always notified whenever a new episode goes up. And if you really want to support the channel, feel free to click the link in the description below. That's going to take you to patreon.com/conqueringhistory, where you can contribute there. And you all have yourselves a wonderful day. It's going to be a great campaign. I'm very excited, and I'll see you then. Bye.